You're not going to believe it. So me and Nanny Di did a review of News of the World, the new Tom Hanks movie on Netflix. I have Nanny Di's camera, but I've had a week from hell when it comes to either losing, deleting, or the cloud doing something quite mysterious with footage. And so consequently the camera on me is lost. Well, not the camera, but the footage. So we did the review, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through quickly my thoughts on it, and then right at the end of my thoughts on it, we're going to compile Nanny Di's top thoughts on the film so that you get both of our opinions. So, News of the World. New film starring Tom Hanks and also the actress Helena Zengel, who is the young 12, 13-year-old actress, German actress, who caused such a sensation, certainly in this household, and I know in indie cinema circles, with System Crasher, in which she played a child that simply couldn't be placed within the school system. It was an incredibly visceral, incredibly angry, very raw performance, in which there was a lot of sort of bad behaviour, and I imagine a lot of scenes where she was encouraged to sort of improvise with the grown-up actors that she was acting opposite. This is News of the World, and this is a Western, or it's certainly set within sort of post-Civil War sort of frontierdom of America. And it stars Tom Hanks, who plays essentially a journeyman who is moving across America from state to state. And in his sort of on his travels, he stops off in various communities and gatherings and reads the news in the papers, the newspapers that he has sort of about him, and reports the news of the world, essentially, or the news of America, or the news of what's going on elsewhere. That's his job. It's almost like he's a kind of magician, or even a preacher or a priest. But no, he brings the news into sort of, isolated communities across America. And therein lies a really interesting, I think, story to be told, especially in this sort of Trumpian, post-Trumpian, or in the middle of a new Trumpian era where, news gathering, the idea of fake news, where do we get our news, what is the agenda behind the news. This was a sort of curious way of sort of looking at that concept through a different prism of a time when effectively the news that these communities in America were receiving was essentially digested through the mind and eyes and ability to read of this one character, Tom Hanks. And that's the sort of theoretical idea at the back of this film, and that's why it's called News of the World. But at the heart of it is a sort of, in a sense, not a buddy movie, but a kind of companionship movie, in which Tom Hanks discovers Helena Zengel abandoned, stranded. She herself has been kidnapped by the Native American Indians from her family, and he essentially takes her under his wing. He takes her under his wing, and then he tries to sort of essentially drop her off in two different places. He tries to take her to, he takes her back to a settlement where he sort of thinks that he might leave her there, but then doesn't feel he can leave her there. He then takes her to her aunt and uncle, where he wants to leave her because she should be with family. At the point that he decides to go back and get her from her aunt and uncle, from her relatives, it then becomes a sort of journey back to his home, his place of origin. And in a sense, it's a very sort of potentially charming, sweet movie, set within, in a Western setting. So you've got a bit of True Grit in there, you've got a bit of The Searchers in there. It's directed by Paul Greengrass, who is a brilliant British director. He directed United 93, I believe it was, the film about the 9/11, one of the planes during 9/11. He also directed the brilliant Captain Phillips, which also starred Tom Hanks, and his ability to sort of create drama and tension. I thought in many ways the best part of this film, there's one scene, and it's 2 hours long, it's quite long, and there's one scene where these sort of rather dubious guys try to intercept Tom Hanks with Helena Zengel, want to sort of buy her off him. Are they child traffickers? Are they paedophiles? What are they? We don't know. But they have a prurient design on wanting the girl. And as Tom Hanks sort of heads out of town, they try to ambush him. And you have a particularly stressful scene where Tom Hanks is trying to escape. He hasn't got any particularly effective bullets or armory to sort of protect against these three guys. And so the tension there, and that for me was in many regards its most exciting moment. There's lots of set pieces. I mean, for example, there's a notable scene when a huge tornado sort of kicks through this sandy area and they potentially lose each other, but they don't lose each other. And the part of that really drove me nuts was check it out. Tom Hanks's hat, he doesn't even have to hold it on. He's not even struggling to hold his hat on. So anyway, so this is a film that is potentially about something quite theoretical and quite complex, which is the way in which news is delivered, it's imparted, it's interpreted, the ways in which certain audiences want to hear only a certain news. For example, he heads into this particular village, or they head into this village at one point, or settlement, where the main industry is the tannery, you know, tanning and taking the fleeces off bison or buffalo. And the chief of that sort of area, who's kind of the main employer of most people who work there, he wants him to only read news that's really sort of complimentary about the company and the industry that's of tanning all these hides. And in a sense, that made me think, oh yeah, this is kind of like an analogy. This is a metaphor for Trump wanting to control his profile and the press and the publicity, and wanting to manage the way in which people receive the news and all that kind of stuff. What's fake news, what's biased news, all that. And yet weirdly, there's this odd constant story between Helena Zengel and Tom Hanks, which I never really got it clarified. So what was the purpose of their sort of companionship? What were they supposed to be getting from each other? What was she learning from him? Obviously, he becomes a bit of a father figure. I couldn't quite work out what he was getting from her. Maybe a sense of belonging and family. His wife, you know, there's an estrangement between him and his wife. And so you're I was left thinking, okay, well, there's a potentially really heartwarming and meaningful relationship here, but it was fundamentally flawed by the fact that she couldn't speak a word of English. He could only speak a very few words of German. There's very little connectivity between the two of them. And it felt very much like Paul Greengrass, who I'm a great fan of in terms of his other films, simply said to the casting director, get that girl who's in System Crasher, who throws really good fits, and she does them. I mean, she does far more than that in System Crasher, but it's almost like that's all they got her to do in this film. Was maybe she could do one of those kind of where she has a real fit, just like she did in System Crasher. And so I felt she wasn't directed to her maximum potential, and I felt she was a bit one note. Not her fault, but I didn't feel like she really knew where she was going. You know, she was essentially doing something not dissimilar. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for this, but really she should have been nominated for the Golden Globe for System Crasher. And so all in all, I didn't really feel this film knew what it was. It didn't know if it was a Western. It didn't know if it was a meditation on news gathering and the impartiality of news. It didn't know if it was a sort of buddy movie. It looked beautiful, and some of the set pieces, they used drones. There's lots of sort of cattle. As I say, there's the sort of tornado scene. You know, as they sort of ride into towns, these sort of Western towns, you get a real sense of the sort of seedy characters and down-at-hill characters you would have had in these places back in the day. You know, they had some of the sort of Western tropes, but at the same time there was a sort of reality and authenticity to it. So I really felt like I was there. And so its sense of place and its sense of era, I thought was really well executed. But I just feel that several things. I felt Paul Greengrass dropped the ball directing Helena Zengel. I don't think he got the best out of her. There was a huge chasm or gap between Tom Hanks and Helena Zengel, partly because of the script and partly because of the language barrier, which didn't even lend itself to comedy. And there was a sort of missed opportunity, really, I think, to sort of hammer home a more meaningful message about why this film's relevant to now, especially as we come out of a Trump presidency. I'm talking about how the press can be biased, whether it be CNN or Fox. You know, I thought there could have been an interesting debate about how in America, since time immemorial, you know, the news has always been interpreted and the news always has an agenda. What is honest news? Is there such a thing as honest news? And I thought that was really rich. So that's my theory on the film. If I was to give it a score out of 100, I'd probably give it quite a low 60 out of 100. I was a bit bored. I was a bit fidgety. I thought it was a bit of a missed opportunity. There were moments there where visually it was really sumptuous and really ticking all those kind of Western sort of memories as a boy and as a film student. But ultimately, it wasn't the sum of its parts didn't really pull it together in any meaningful way. Now, I've given it 60. I'm going to flip over to Nanny Di's Best Of.
Hi.
With Nanny Di.
I thought what was good as well is that they can't communicate really.
No.
Well, not with words, but they can communicate with other things, and yet they managed to somehow.
Yeah.
And that was sort of quite, well, touching and also sort of funny. And this essentially is built around him, although you've got the girl. And the girl, up to a point, could you could say she steals the show in those little set pieces, but they're very much little set pieces. And in the sort of scenes like where she's supposed to scream and cry and kick, it's almost like they've said scream, cry, kick,
like you did in System
yeah.
Crusher.
And
Did you do what you did in System Crusher?
And bless her, she does, but without the sort of inner motivation that she had in System Crusher. So it's a film so firmly based around Tom Hanks' persona and his reliability and his dadness and his. I mean, don't get me wrong, in terms of the story, he's not happy about taking this child because he's got other things to do. But he agrees, and in the end, because he's Tom Hanks and the character he's playing, he does do it to the best of his ability. And then along the way, he discovers that his family, who he's trying to get back to, have been killed. And so that's when he decides to go back and get the girl. And all of that is a bit twee, isn't it? Because she joins up with him and blah, 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 blah. And for me, a standout scene with the girl was the very end one, where she's almost not acting in that last bit, where she's delighted that all the people are listening to her. But having said that, it's the end. She was looking at him in a sort of way of a mentor type way, which I thought was so sweet.
She was very sweet.
And clearly he can do a normal Western, because, as you say, the bits where he's threatened are brilliant, tense. And the idea of those guys, wanting to get that child. And also, over the actual business of the news of the world, as you say, because it kept coming and going, it kept appearing and then disappearing as a subject, I started to think, this is about 3/4 of the way through it, so I was thinking, am I the only one that's fascinated by this? Is it because I'm a librarian? Why aren't they talking more about that? It doesn't sort of fit together neatly at all. There are some very good bits in it and some poor bits. The direction, I would say, for the girl is, as you say, very weak. Hanks doesn't need any direction. He's just Hanks, and he just
yes, he is,
and he's good.
It's Woody on a horse.
He is, yeah. And I don't know if it's just me, but I could watch him for hours. I think there have been some very unfair reviews, though. One review I read said that was talking about the use of drones and how inappropriate it was to use drones.
I quite like that. Yeah, I mean, I can.
They didn't use drones except twice.
Well, no, I thought the dust
storm was well done.
Well, it was kind of well done, but he would have lost her. His hat didn't move. His hat didn't move. He didn't even try and keep it on.
I didn't notice that.
Watch it back. It was.
He's
buggy.
Woody, of course. His hat
I was
wouldn't
thinking
move.
he's got a snake in his boot. But I mean,
she's going to have trouble, I think, in what they give her.
Well, she needs a part now where she doesn't have a single sort of temper tantrum.
Yeah, that's true.
Just to prove,
that
I think
she
that's
can.
It's critical that a casting agent gets her something where she doesn't go mad.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, it's based on a novel, and it makes me wonder if the novel, if he veered away from the novel because he'd got the girl. So because that must have been a big. Yeah, now what would I give it? I would give it. Oh, wow, this is a difficult one.
It is a difficult one.
64.2.
What? We've got a decimal point in there when we're even in the hundreds.
Yeah.
64.2.
Yes, and not 70 and not, yeah.
For more film and family fun, don't forget to click the subscribe button and make sure to click the bell to never miss an update.